Welcome to biology class. I am Ejiro Efere. Today we shall continue our lesson on the series Regulation of the Internal Environment from the theme Organism at Work. This is the 9th part and we will continue learning about the skin. By the end of today's class, you should be able to mention and describe some structures found in the mammalian skin, and you should be able to use a well-labeled diagram to identify these structures in the mammalian skin. In our previous lesson, that's the 8th part of this lesson, we learned about the skin. We were introduced to the skin. We said the skin is a tissue, a membranous tissue that covers the entire surface of the bodies of animals. We looked at the different layers of tissues in the skin. We said it consists of 2 major layers, which are the epidermis and dermis. The epidermis has some other sub-layers, while the dermis also have some sub-layers. Across the layers of the skin, that's across the epidermis and the dermis, there are different structures that perform various functions in the body. The structures are found in the skin and they perform various functions in the skin as well as in the body. Some of these structures are exclusively found in particular layers. That means there are some of the structures that are found only in the dermis, while there are some found only in the epidermis, while some other types of the structures are found in both layers. In today's class, we shall look at these different types of structures and find out some of the roles they perform in the body. Some structures present in the skin are hairs, follicles, hair follicles, nails, sebaceous glands, sweat, blood vessels, and nerve endings. Let's begin with the first one. Begin with hairs. Do you have hairs on your skin? Have you ever seen someone with a hairy skin? Hairs are structures that are found on the skin of mammals. Hairs distinguish mammals from other types of animals. Mammals are characterized with hairs on their skin. So the hair is an organ or a structure that is made of dead cells. It is a tissue that is made up of dead cells. So once again, we meet a structure on the skin that consists of dead cells. The cells of the hair are filled with keratin. We encounter keratin protein. Once again, they are filled with keratin protein. So they have keratinocytes, cells that produce keratin. Hairs are found all over the bodies of mammals except in areas of skin such as on the palms of the hands, the soles of the feet, and in the lips. On the lips, of course, we do not have hair on your lips. We do not have hair on the palm of our hands and also on the soles of our feet. What does hair do in the body? Or what do they do in the skin? Hairs help to insulate our bodies. They do this by trapping hot air around the skin. So the hairs on our skin help to trap air around the surface of our skin. We may not see this process taking place, but this is what actually happens in the skin or on the skin. Hairs also protect the skin from excess exposure to sunlight because they are directly on the surface of our skin. They protect the skin from excess exposure to sunlight. They also act as filters that prevent dust from entering some parts of the body. So the hairs on our nostrils help to filter dust from the air we inhale. The hairs in our ears also help to filter dust from entering our ears. Hair as a structure has several parts. It consists of the hair roots, the hair shaft, and the hair follicle. The hair roots, which is what we can see deep in the skin, the part of the hair in the skin, as you can see from the diagram. The hair shaft is the part of the hair outside the skin. So that is what we usually see when we look at our skin. So those hair strands you see on your skin is regarded as the hair shafts. The hair roots and hair shafts consists of 3 different layers of dead tissues, dead cells. So if you pick the hair strand and examine it through the microscope, you will discover that it has these different layers. These layers are the cuticle, the cortex, and the medulla. So a cross-section of the hair strand will reveal all of these layers. We can see the cuticle is an outer layer, the cortex is the middle layer, while the medulla is the inner layer. The cuticle, which is the outer layer, is filled with hard keratin cells. Remember, in this case, these keratin cells are dead. So they are also called keratinocytes because they are cells that secrete keratin. The cortex, which is at the middle, it is the thickest layer of the hair. It contains cells that are filled with melanin. So this middle layer, which is the cortex, as you can see, contains melanocytes, cells filled with melanin or cells that secrete melanin. And of course, you know at this time that melanin is a pigment that protects the body or the skin from ultraviolet radiations from sunlight, and helps also give the skin its color. The inner layer, which is the medulla layer, is filled with hair and keratin protein. So this gives us a brief description of what the hair is made of. The second structure we can see in the skin, or present in the skin rather, is the hair follicle. Of course, we can't see this by looking at the external surface of the skin. It is deep in the skin. The hair follicle is a cavity, or we can say it is a sac or a groove that is deep in the skin. So this is the shape of the follicle. This is the shape of the sac or the groove or the cavity. The hair follicle produces hair. So it is a sac or a cavity that produces hair. So the hair we see is produced by the hair follicle. The hair follicle is formed by the infolding of the malpighian layer of the epidermis into the dermis. Remember we said the malpighian layer has infoldings that penetrate deep into the dermis. So these infoldings of the epidermis into the dermis gives us the sac or the hair follicle. At the base of each hair follicle is the dermal papilla. Remember the dermal papilla from the dermis, which is the protrusion, or which is a protrusion of the dermis into the epidermis. So we have the dermis, which is this layer of tissue protruding into the dermis. So it forms some finger-like projections into the dermis, and it forms this dermal papilla. So the dermal papilla, as we described in our previous lesson, is filled with a network of blood vessels and nerves. We said nutrients and oxygen from this network of blood vessels diffuse from some part of the dermis into the part of the epidermis close to the dermal papilla. So somehow, these blood vessels help to transport nutrients and oxygen through diffusion to those parts of the epidermis. This nourishment and oxygen helps the hair follicle to continue to divide itself so as to produce new cells, which helps the growth of hair. So somehow, the dermal papilla nourishes the hair follicle and helps the hair to grow properly. Attached to the hair follicle are 2 important structures, arrector pili muscles and sebaceous gland. This is the sebaceous gland, always attached to the hair follicle, and we can see the arrector pili muscles. What do they do? The arrector pili muscle, as a muscle, contracts and regulates the position of the hair follicle. So when it contracts, it pulls the hair follicle in an upright position, and when it relaxes, it allows the hair follicles to relax, causing hair strands to lie flat on the skin. Sebaceous gland, on the other hand, which we are going to talk about, produces a substance that is called sebum. The next structure we shall be talking about are the nails. The nails are also present on the skin, although not in all parts of the skin. The nails are accessory organs, or accessory structures rather, that are found on the skin of the distal ends of the fingers and toes. The nails are made of sheaths of hardened keratinocytes. These are also non-living. They are also dead. Hardened keratinocytes. Fingernails and toenails perform some functions in the body. They help to protect the end of the digits. They help to protect the ends of our fingers and our toes. They protect them from dangerous or harmful substances in the external environment. They are also used for scraping. We can use them to scrape things. We can use our nails to scrape our skins and perform some other important scraping functions. We can also use the nails to manipulate, and we can use them to grip some things. For those that have long nails, they can use them to pick things and hold things. The nails have various parts. They have three main parts. We have the nail roots, the nail body, and the free edge. We can see the nail roots, which is deep under the skin. This is the nail body, which is the part we see on top of the skin. Then we can see the free edge, which is the outgrowth of the nail, the part that grows out from the nail body. These different parts perform protective functions together in the skin. Nails grow from a part of the epidermis, which is called the nail matrix. The nail matrix is somewhat below or beneath the nail roots. These cells in the nail matrix divide continuously to form this keratin, hardened keratin that forms the nail. Another structure we shall be looking at are the sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands secrete oily substances called sebum. Remember, we saw the sebaceous glands when we were talking about the hair follicle. We said they are attached to the hair follicle. So these glands secrete oily sebum. They secrete the oil substance we find on our skin. They secrete this substance into the hair follicle. As we can see, this is the sebaceous gland, which opens into the hair follicle. So it releases sebum into the hair follicle. And from the follicle, sebum is secreted to the surface of the skin through the hair pores. These glands are found in skins all over the body, except for the skins on the palms of the hand and soles of the feet. So we can say except for thick skin. Thick skins do not have sebaceous gland. Sebaceous glands are most abundant on the face and the scalp. So we can find the skin on our face constantly secreting sebum, secreting oil as a result of the abundance of sebaceous gland. What does sebum do in the body? Sebum helps to lubricate our skin. It helps our skin to be greasy, giving it some form of lubrication, and it also prevents water from entering into our skin. So it prevents the skin from the invasion of germs, prevents germs, as microorganisms, from penetrating our skin. It has a way of destroying these germs. So sebum is very important on our skin. The next structure in the skin is the sweat glands. Sweat glands are small tubular structures present in the dermis of the skin. We cannot see them on the surface of the skin, but they are always there. So if you take a look at this structure, you find the sweat gland. They are deep in the dermis and they always form a coily structure. What do they do? The sweat glands secrete sweat to the surface of the skin. So they secrete sweat on the skin. They secrete sweat through the sweat ducts. So we have the sweat glands deep in the dermis, and we have the tube that transports its secretion to the external surface of the skin, which is called the sweat duct. So we can use SD for sweat duct. So the sweat duct opens to the surface of the skin through the sweat pore. So most times when we look closely at our skins, we see some tiny spots. They will not be too clear, which are the sweat ducts. So through the sweat ducts, sweat is secreted from the sweat glands into the surface of the skin. Through these pores, sweat is released from the skin to the surface. Sweat is formed through the absorption of fluid from the surrounding capillaries. Remember, The dermis, as we described earlier, is filled with a network of blood vessels which are usually capillaries, those tiny blood vessels. So these capillaries, as they pass close to the sweat ducts, fluid diffuse. So you can see this is a capillary entering the sweat duct or going close to the sweat duct. Fluid diffuse from the capillaries into the sweat duct, and this fluid form the sweat. This sweat or this fluid contains various excretory substances. Remember, sweat is an excretory product. These substances include water, which forms most part of sweat. Then we have some waste excretory products such as chloride. We also have urea, uric acid, and so on. All of these are substances that are secreted from the sweat pores as sweat. There are different types of sweat glands. We have the apocrine sweat glands, and we also have the eccrine sweat glands. All of these are present in the bodies in different locations. The first group, which are the apocrine sweat glands, are located in specific areas of the body. They are modified sweat glands. They are modified sweat glands found in specific areas of the body. They are not located all over the body. They are found in areas of the body such as the armpits. They are also found in the ears. Then we can find them on the genitals. The genitals are those reproductive organs, areas of the reproductive organs. These areas secrete a special or a different kind of sweat. The sweat secreted by the apocrine sweat glands are usually thick and oily. So they are thick and oily. These areas secrete thick and oily sweat that easily generates body odor. So most times when you try to smell or perceive the smell from your armpit, it smells awful. You don't like the smell. That's as a result of the kind of sweat secreted by the apocrine sweat gland present in these areas. This odor produced from this kind of sweat is as a result of the breakdown of this kind of sweat, which is of course a waste product, by certain kinds of bacteria present in the skin. So these bacteria help to decompose the sweat, and as they do this, they release very awful smell from these sweats. The other group of sweat glands are the eccrine sweat glands. Eccrine sweat glands are located all over the bodies. What do? They secrete watery sweat. So they secrete the regular sweat which we see on our bodies. These sweats are not oily, they are watery. They are the kind of sweats that helps or that cause cooling effect on the body. So as the sweats are secreted from the skin, they evaporate and cause cooling effects on the body. At this point, to look at the blood vessels as structures that are present in the skin. The blood vessels, which they are mostly arterioles, venules, and capillaries. Remember, these are smaller blood vessels. Some transport oxygenated blood to the skin, while some help to transport deoxygenated blood away from the skin. So they supply nutrients and oxygen to the dermal cells, to the cells of the dermis. Remember, this area is the epidermis. It doesn't contain blood supply. It doesn't have blood vessels. So these blood vessels can only get to the dermis. As you know, nutrients and oxygen that gets to the dermis diffuse from the blood vessels around the dermis into some part of the epidermis. So from the capillaries, arterioles, or venules, it is possible to have oxygen or nutrient diffusing in or out of the epidermis. The next group of structures we shall be looking at are nerve endings. Nerve endings are also present in the skin. Remember, the skin is a sense organ. Remember, it is part of the 6 types of sense organ. The skin, as a sense organ, is flooded with various types of sensory nerve endings. These are sensory nerve endings because they detect or they sense stimulations, they sense impulses, they sense stimuli on the skin. So these sensory nerve endings can also be called nerve receptors. They receive stimulus. They receive signals from the skin. So they detect stimuli such as pain. So the skin feels pain. They also detect touch, pressure, and change in temperature. They can also detect different kinds of stimuli. These sensory nerve endings detect signals, and when they detect these signals, they send them to appropriate centers or appropriate parts of the body, such as the brain. They usually send these signals to the brain, and the brain finds a way to respond to these signals or to these stimuli. There are different types of nerve endings present in the skin. We have the Meissner corpuscle. This group of nerve endings detect sensations such as touch from the skin. Remember, we saw this kind of nerve ending in the previous part, the Merkel's cells that detect touch from the skin. They are most sensitive at the palmar surfaces of the finger. Let me also mention that Merkel's cells are also most abundant at the palmar surfaces of the finger. That's at this surface of the finger. That's why we use this point to do those fingerprints, and we can easily see a fingerprint because of the presence or the abundance of this kind of cells, this kind of receptors, touch-sensitive receptors, Meissner's and the Merkel's cells. The next group are the Ruffini's corpuscle. Ruffini's corpuscle are sensory receptors that detect pressure on the skin. We can see Ruffini's corpuscle on the skin. They detect sensory stimulations or sensory stimuli. We also have the Pacinian corpuscle. Pacinian corpuscle detects pressure. You can see the Pacinian corpuscle also present in the skin. It helps to feel or detect pressure on the skin. Then we have a group of other nerve endings that are described as the free nerve endings. The free nerve endings detect pain. They detect the presence of chemicals. They also detect changes in temperature. So we have those that detect changes in temperature. These ones are called thermoreceptors. So when you hear of thermoreceptors, just remember that they are also part of nerve endings. Those that detect pain on the skin are called nociceptors. Nociceptors detect pains on the skin. We also have some called chemoreceptors. Chemoreceptors detect the presence of chemical substances on the skin. All of these different nerve endings help our skin to detect changes in the environment or changes on the skin and help the body to protect or defend itself against these changes. So before we end today's class, let's quickly do a recap of all we've been learning today. We said the skin is a membranous tissue that covers the external surfaces of the bodies of animals. This we did as way of review from our previous class, of course. Some of the structures present in the skin are hair follicles, hairs, nails, sebaceous glands, sweat glands, blood vessels, and nerve endings. Some examples of nerve endings which we learned about in today's class are Merkel's cells. This we did as way of review. We learned about Merkel's cells in our previous class. We saw the Meissner corpuscles, Pacinian corpuscles, Ruffini's corpuscle, and free nerve endings. And of course, they detect different kinds of signals from the skin. To find out how well you've learned from today's class, I'd like you to take this question. The modified sweat glands that secrete wax in the ear canal of mammals is called dash. Remember? So there are certain kinds of sweat glands that are found in specific areas of the skin, which includes the ear. A. Sebaceous gland. B. Eccrine gland. C. Apocrine gland. And D. Ceruminous gland. The correct answer here is option C. Apocrine gland. They secrete oily substances in the areas where they are found. The second question. The part of the hair below the surface of the skin is called the dash. A. The hair follicle. B. Hair roots. C. The hair base. Or D. The hair shaft. The correct answer is option B. The hair root is a part of the hair below the surface of the skin, and the shaft is a part above the surface of the skin. We have come to the end of today's class. I want to believe you enjoyed the class and you learned everything about the structures that are present in the skin. I hope at this point you can describe the hair follicle, hair, you can describe nails, you can also describe the different glands such as sebaceous and sweat glands present in the skin. I hope you can also list some of the nerve endings in the skin and describe their functions. Until next time in our next class, thank you for staying in today's class.